Okay, good afternoon and welcome to this presentation session by Gretchen Vermeulen from AJ Gallagher and Company. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Gretchen for taking out her precious time to be with us and speak to our students. I would like to also welcome all the participants and thank you all for your participation in today's event. I would like to briefly describe some ground rules for today's session. As you can see, the audio and video recording notice, this session is being recorded. If you do not want to be recorded, you can mute yourself, you can turn your cameras off so that your recordings you'll not be recorded. Now, during the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to chat those questions in the chat box to your lower right hand corner. Any questions that you have should be sent to us in the form of chat messages. Whenever Gretchen stops for asking questions, we will read out those questions. Um, with that said, I would like to now introduce Gretchen Vermeulen, our speaker for today.
Great. Thank you, Shazad. I appreciate the introduction and the kind words. Really welcome the opportunity to share my story, but more importantly, probably, to share what I've learned, to share kind of some missteps along the way, perhaps, that then translated into great successes. But I think some key things that I always bring into conversations is the importance of learning, right? And the importance of all of us learning as we continue through whatever path we end up taking, right? And I don't think there's any incorrect path. I think your path is your own, and owning it and learning is going to be very adventurous. And so I welcome the opportunity to share and also learn from you and any questions that you might have. So if we're looking at the conversation today, just wanted to jump in and talk about analytics in this very disruptive world we're living in, which will probably continue forever in the way we live and how we communicate. But there's great opportunities, especially in the area of analytics. I'll talk to you a little bit about my career story, so to speak, and tell you a few stories along the way that have shaped who I am. And I've learned a little bit about myself as I've gone through this process as well of living. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's next in terms of what I'm hearing in the industry, what I'm seeing in the marketplace, as well as what I'm learning, again, about the area of data and analytics as we evolve forward. And then I'll talk to you a little bit about Gallagher. Gallagher is a large organization. We are the fourth largest brokerage firm in the US. We're in 950 countries, and there's great opportunities for data and analytics in a number of fields within Gallagher. So I wanted to share with you some information on that plane as well. Let's move to the next slide. All right, did that come up? Oh, awesome. I love it when things work.
Yes.
So when we think about where we're at today, a lot of things have changed dramatically because of the pandemic for the good. There's a lot that's coming to light that we didn't see, but there's a lot of good going on as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that. When you think about analytics, it is adapting to change. And whether that's the change in the pandemic, or it's a change in technology advances, or is it in a way that we interact with each other? Analytics is changing forward with all those other things that are moving and being dynamic in the world we live. Things that we're seeing work in terms of business and success and strategy is really collaborating with each other. That's not only with looking at the data and the analytics, but it's collaborating with each other to understand each other, to understand how we connect, where we connect, and also how one idea that someone has can build upon another and can make the end product or service or whatever is being delivered improve. Again, communication, we talked a little bit about that at the beginning of this conversation and how important everybody is to the conversation and connecting us to each other, whether it's utilizing technology, whether it's getting us all to meet at the same spot at the same time. Communication is key, and our channels of communication have exploded, as we all know, in the last few years. And again, as I say, and sometimes these situations are very positive, and in other times we're having to learn from things that don't go quite so well, which is going to happen within business, and it's going to happen in analytics as well. I frequently share with the team on a daily basis, data is not going to be perfect, but you've got to run with what you've got and learn from it and move forward. If you wait for it to be perfect, you're just going to wait and you will be left behind. So a little bit about some of the industries and what's going on. When we look at the energy space, we know that globally we are trying to take global initiatives and policies and implement them also nationally and vice versa. In order to do that, we're needing data and analytics to move us forward, looking at consumption, looking at shift in consumer patterns, looking at shifts even within the entire globe. We know that the pandemic has shifted energy use to a more residential setting from the commercial setting. And in many cases, our energy consumption is less efficient in the residential setting. So therefore, we're really needing to course correct and readjust on how we look at our supply and demand in that sector. All industries are starting to look like NASA. I was at Optum RX, which is a large pharmacy benefit management company, and went into their customer service center, and I thought I was walking into a NASA environment, or that I was at, the controllers of aircraft flying across the globe. But using that data and information in a way that can deliver thoughtful value to a customer service team member is really important. And we're learning that every day. Not very many of us really want to stand on the line and ask questions that aren't answered and then have to wait in a queue. So being able to deliver thoughtful information to our service team members, as well as anybody that is delivering products and services internally to our employees, is vitally important. Something that's changed that I think is really important was brought up by a gentleman by the name of Duncan Watts. Duncan Watts is a researcher at Microsoft. He is now at the University of Pennsylvania, but he's a sociologist, so he's not even a analytics technology person, but he did work for Microsoft, so I'm sure he's gained a lot along the way. But what he has provided to us is the importance of networks and the importance of how networks connect, right? How technology connects to healthcare, how healthcare then connects to education, and how these networks integrate is really important. One example that comes to mind, I had it the other day, and I saved it. So is anybody aware of this company? Are you familiar with it? It doesn't exist anymore, but it did exist and was a very prominent company in the consumer space, Blockbuster Video. They were making millions, billions. And in 2000, Netflix CEO approached them and said, "Hey, would you like to partner with us? We would like to create an online presence. We've got this new subscription model. How about that?" Well, needless to say, Blockbuster didn't take up the CEO's offer and continued down their path. Now, their business model was very reliant on late fees. That was a massive influx of revenue to their business. But what Netflix did is Netflix took the opportunity not to go to retail, So they didn't have that cumbersome capital investment. They were able to diversify their offerings, and they offered something different. And they gave you a subscription to videos and access to games and everything else. And gradually, the marketplace shifted and enjoyed this subscription service. It might have seemed like a little bit higher on the front end, but you didn't get these annoying late fees, which we all despise. Gradually, things shifted, and Blockbuster was bankrupt by 2010. And we know where Netflix is. They are now a $28 billion company, and they are 10 times what Blockbuster was. It's just one example of how things shift and how data and analytics and observing networks is going to be very important to companies, all companies in the future. Another example that I love is Moneyball. It's a 2011 movie with Brad Pitt, but it really depicts what happens to the Oakland Athletics in 2002. Billy Beane had low resources, not enough money. He's like, how am I going to compete? My team is just not going to make it. So what he did is he enlisted something called Sabre Analytics, something like that. But what it is, it's empirical analysis of how players in play statistics rate against each other, right? So ERAs or batting averages, how they do against certain pitchers. So they use this data and analytics to then evaluate undervalued talent, hired them into the Oakland Athletics organization, and they won their division that year. They didn't win the World Series, but other baseball teams watched what they were doing and were very intrigued. Boston Red Sox tried to hire Billy Beane. He said no, but the Boston Red Sox still took the same methodology and won the World Series 2 years later. So something to remember, that things will shift. And so whatever industry you move into throughout your career, it's going to be very important to kind of understand what the rest of the marketplace is doing. Another thing that's occurred during the pandemic, which is a really positive thing, and it's there for a number of reasons. Telehealth, and you might be aware of that, being able to see a physician or a clinician virtually versus standing in line, going to a hospital, waiting in a waiting room. You can literally get that clinical advice, assistance virtually within a short amount of time. The value of this has expanded access, which is tremendously important when it comes to healthcare. It started out at less than 3 to 4% before the pandemic and is now in the 20% range. So hospitals at one point in time didn't really have strong telehealth services. It was standalone that was happening with different organizations and companies that just delivered telehealth services. Maven was one of them, Teladoc is another one. But what happened during the pandemic, the government said, we need to be able to use telehealth. They put legislation in place so that insurance companies had to accept telehealth. They put pricing increments in line with at-home visits, so it was more lucrative for providers to jump in. And they also eased up some of the guidance on security and privacy. Nothing that is detrimental to anyone's privacy, but some of the little nuances on the regulations to then let this explode and increase the access to healthcare, which has been a tremendous asset. So let's talk a little bit about how I got here. I will not bore you with too many details, but I'm happy to answer any questions along the way. So I started out in the neonatal intensive care unit. So that is a unit with babies that are premature. I was a clinical nurse, really enjoyed it. Knew I wanted to go to grad school. So I started looking at in Chicago. I grew up outside of Detroit. And so when I came to Chicago, I couldn't find a job in the neonatal intensive care that allowed me to work during the day. So I ended up taking a job in the operating room, which is perfect because I grew up with an engineer as a father, and I loved gadgets and I loved technology. So I landed in the operating room, loved it, knew the importance of teams, knew the importance of continuing to learn, but also continued to understand how the world needs to be compassionate towards others and really trying to understand other people. As that moved forward, I thought, I don't know if I really want to do this the rest of my life. A lot of risk exposure physically to what's going on in terms of diseases at the time. And so I thought, I bet I could solve the world problems and help insurance companies understand how healthcare works. So I moved over into insurance, and then from there went to CVS Health and worked with pharmacy benefit companies and worked with employer groups to help them understand how they could rearrange their benefits so that they could then spend less money, but also, again, improve outcomes. My Gallagher experience has culminated in all these things coming together. Something that I've learned along the way is that, jumping in when things may not go your way and jumping in deep. For example, when my situation in the operating room, I came to the understanding that I really wanted to change, I thought, oh no, I don't even know anything about insurance. How am I going to do this? If you're willing to learn, there's always going to be somebody on that path that will believe in you and will give you the chance. So take the leap. Don't not raise your hand, and don't try to move forward through whatever challenges you may incur. Something that I learned in the neonatal intensive care unit was about myself was that I do okay jumping into emergency situations. And I really can, and I learned to excel in those situations. So then when I'm looking at the business situation now, I'm like, all right, no one's going to die. Everybody's going to be okay. Let's just walk through it piece by piece and understand what we need to do to course correct whatever challenge has been placed in front of us. When I worked at the state of Illinois, I learned, one, there's a lot of meetings in the government space, but there's a lot of really strong insight and really smart people working in the government space as well. And I had never seen all the aspects of government, but understanding how things work in the government can be a tremendous asset now to me in the work that I do in working with employer groups, including those with municipalities, states, and anyone that is guided by the regulations and the rules that are put in place, not only by the federal government, but also by state and local governments. So that experience has brought me great value when it comes to Gallagher, especially during the pandemic, when we're trying to get through these rules and regulations, and the timeframes for getting regulations keep shortening or lengthening, and everybody thinks they've got the inside skinny on it, yet no one really knows. Any questions so far?
I don't see any in the chat at this time, Gretchen, so please feel free to continue.
Okay. So what I've learned, I think it's really valuable, and some of the things you learn along the way, and I'm sure you've got mentors and people that you work with, or colleagues or sisters or brothers and parents and neighbors that share anecdotal information as they go along. But three things I think that I've really learned along the way that I did not bring to the table when I first started my career was really stepping back as you start working with someone, is to really understand their perspective. It can help you through a lot of challenges. It can help you through a lot of potential conflicts someone reads an email and you're like, that doesn't sound right. You're thinking, well, maybe if I changed my view or literally thought about their perspective or picked up the phone and talked to them about their perspective, it will help me understand their reaction to what I'm doing, which is really important when you're looking at analytics, because sometimes what you're sharing isn't exactly happiness. You know, you're not always going to be able to share great results. You're not always going to be able to share something that someone understands immediately. They're going to have questions, or they're not going to have questions. And that means they probably don't understand if they don't have questions. So being able to deliver information in a usable way for people is really important. And some of that can come from having allies. So talking to people in different parts of your company that you land in is really important, and say, hey, you know what, take a look at this. I'm presenting this to a few people later today or tomorrow or next week. Do you have any questions if I present it this way? Or does this make sense? And they'll give you really candid feedback that you probably won't see yourself. I've been able to shift presentations, shifted data visualizations so that people can understand it. Because if you can't communicate and get your point across, it's going to be very difficult to be successful. So be willing to ask allies, be willing to cultivate allies, and sometimes going out of your way to help other people when you're thinking, oh, geez, am I really needing to do this? In the long run, it will prove to help you long-term on your own path. One example that I'd bring back to the table from the state of Illinois actually was when I was working with a group, and I was proposing performance metrics that then would lead to improved outcomes, both financially and from a healthcare standpoint of view. I'm like, okay, this is what I would propose. And a very smart person said, all right, that's a lot. I know we're supposed to be comprehensive, but it's too much. So what we did is we literally, backed up the truck and said, all right, we're going to organize the same 280 metrics into categories, and then we'll talk about one category at a time so that people can kind of get used to the conversation versus 280 metrics sitting in front of them. Now, it took them about 3-4 years to get there, but they're there and they're looking at all the metrics now. But it helps to bring people along and willing to ask the questions and willing to take some negative feedback and change things and shift things so that other people's perspectives can be cared for is really important. I've also learned that it's really important to have a champion. And that means somebody that is maybe external to what you're doing within your employment, but also someone internally, whether it be a mentor and or a champion that understands what you're trying to do, that you can talk to one-on-one, get some immediate feedback, get some ideas, help you to navigate some challenges or speed bumps, or navigate to connect you to the right people, is really important. So I would encourage everybody to seek that out early, and then also continue to gain more champions throughout an organization. And that means helping other people, again, when maybe you're like, oh, I'm really busy, I don't have time. Taking a little extra time can pay off in the long run when you need it to champion what you're doing. Any questions before we move on?
None at this time.
All right. Boy, I'm going to get tired of me talking too. So it'll probably be shortened if there's no chat questions. But you're free to call me after this conversation as well in case you have questions.
Thanks.
So what's next? I don't have a crystal ball, but there's industries that are woefully needing data and analytics, right? So when you think about it, Zoom, we're all Zooming. I think we're all going to start coming back. So it's going to be this hybrid experience of Zooming yet connecting. We're finding within Gallagher, and we've always known the value of relationships, and relationships mean being able to spend time with each other outside of work, doing fun things, as well as working forward and contributing to the community. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But that has dramatically changed how we interact. So get used to it and embrace it. And we're all still learning. Shahzad and I had to work through some audio things even this morning, and this afternoon. So something else that's happening is industries are truly embracing the use of technology. The energy groups are embracing it. Education is embracing it. But we're learning some things, and we're learning where some gaps are. So in terms of energy, we still know that there are huge gaps, and there are huge things that we're learning. For example, in Texas, when they had the extreme freeze that happened, it damaged some of the paint products and all the components that go into making paint. I know it sounds kind of quirky. Like, oh, well, how many times do you paint things? Well, the construction industry is very dependent upon paint. And without paint, there is no real alternative because of our dependencies. The other thing that we found out about children learning from home is, one, we know that broadband access didn't exist for everybody. And I think we knew it. It just kind of became glaringly obvious. And what we've learned also is some children are doing better learning online when it comes to math and some of the sciences. However, we saw in a study in South Carolina looking at children, about 47,000 children, is that English, language, and the arts are more difficult for children to learn in a virtual world. We're seeing that they're anywhere from 3 to 4 months lagging behind. And in the math side, the remote learners, they felt that they were lagging behind only by 1 or 2 months. So dramatic differences in how we look at education, how children learn, and all the metrics that go into that are going to be really important as we move forward. Because again, we're seeing that remote learning is going to be a wave in the future. In the Midwest, when we get snow days, many schools are planning not to really have snow days, but to turn to remote learning. So that opportunity is going to continue to explode due to the pandemic and due to what we've learned along the way. I think, was there a question before I moved on, Shahzad?
Yes. I think you were referring to having a champion. So there's a question from one of our students. She's wanting to know what are some impacts of not having a champion.
Yeah. So something that occurred to me is I was working in the operating room and I was interviewing for a job. And I had champions that I worked for, and they were great people. However, I didn't let them know that I was interviewing for a job within the organization. I interviewed, I wasn't given the position. And afterwards, they're like, didn't you interview for the job? I'm like, yes, I did. They're like, why didn't you get it? So not only do you kind of need a champion, you need to stay connected to the champion and be transparent so that they can kind of work their magic, so to speak, and work their connections behind the scenes on your behalf. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Yes, I think it does. Thank you so much.
Okay, sure. Um, Another area that I think is, I cringe every time I hear it, but we still are having major supply chain issues um, across all industries, right? We don't have computer chips, we don't have fabric, we don't have A, B, and C. Um, in the industry, in healthcare, we have a lot of wearables that are now being used to monitor people, their blood pressure, their activity levels, their glucose levels. And without these computer chips, we can't measure those things remotely. Right? This is also affecting the athletic industry, right? They do a lot. The Olympics did this in using wearables to monitor the performance of athletes. Well, without the supply chain being in place for that industry and for those athletes, the way they're able to monitor their performance potentially can shift. So we're really wanting the supply chain to get corrected. Holidays are coming up. People are thinking, what are we going to do? But more importantly, we all saw the toilet paper or the decline of toilet paper on the shelves early in the pandemic. We're seeing some diminished supply chain issues. We talked about the paint, monitors for computers are now low as well. We're trying to get Aruba connections to connect people remotely, but all these things have downstream effects. Yet, I was talking with somebody in the shipping industry, as well as the trucking industry, and some of the glitches are having to do with the legislative processes that are going on in terms of what truckers have to do in order to go into these shipyards to get these containers to then leave and deliver the goods to the end user or to the next user to develop the end product. So I'm sure you all have seen and heard, ships are just circling Long Beach or they're circling San Francisco Bay trying to get in, and also the shipyards have pallets and containers that need to move out in order to make room for the next shipment in. I can just sit here and think, wow, I think they need some analysts over there to try to help them operationalize what's going on and what needs to move where and when. I think they've got some really good technology in place, but obviously something's not working. And then we've got a huge opportunity in the way we look at climate and what's going on with our climate, how the environment is shifting, how that's affecting our agricultural yield, how is that affecting individuals in the housing industry, how is that affecting individuals across the globe, access to resources, and how the shift in the weather potentially is going to shift how we live and where we live and how we build. So all those things that are monitoring what's going on, not only at a higher level in terms of how we live, but then how do we accommodate those shifts into the transportation of goods and services, how we use our resources. So all that data and information is being captured, but will continue needing to be analyzed and then cross-referenced against other data. Any questions before I share with you something? I don't know if anybody has seen Teachable Machine. Has anybody seen this awesome technology?
We do have a couple of questions that have come in. One of them is, what tools does your company use to manage analytics?
Yeah, really good question. We have a number of platforms that we're using. We view, from a software standpoint of view, we're using Power BI in many situations. Obviously, programmers, we're using SAS, and we're implementing Tableau into the software packages that we do. We still do the number crunching sometimes on Excel files, but most of the time we're able to run things with sophisticated models with our actuary and underwriting team in order to produce things that are more integrated and more forward thinking, and that also use not only machine learning but predictive modeling. I do not get involved in that minutia level, but they're a really smart, sophisticated team, a lot of data scientists, and again, as I say, a lot of mathematicians that are able to help us with an understanding of the data coming in. We use claims data, but we also are able to integrate clinical data and lab data, which is really important for us on the healthcare side. But our property and casualty team and our workman's comp team and our risk placement services team also use different data sets, and again are integrating as much information as we can. Any other questions? And I'm happy to get back to you on some of the technology pieces. It's just not something that I get into the details on a daily basis.
Thank you, Gretchen. Here is another question. Do you have any advice on how we could better develop an analytical perspective at our stage?
So I think jump in, look, just search. Google has been amazing. I think looking at online courses that are free, also looking and listening to YouTube presentations on the terminology people are using and how they're discussing analytics will help you, because as you look at the details and whether you're running a program, whether you're creating a program, being able to translate that information into the business setting is going to be critical. Unfortunately, the business teams sometimes don't understand the data and analytics that's going on behind the scenes and that you're going to be able to present. So understanding how you translate that information will be critical. And the way you can do that is by listening to prominent speakers, reading up. I think Duncan Watt's book, he speaks to the 6 degrees of how we can look at networks. But Duncan Watts, look him up. He's very very easygoing and good reading. And it's the science of the connected age. I think he'll help translate some of that information for you as well.
Thank you. One more question. In this huge world of data analytics, which are the sources, web pages, online courses that you would recommend to continue our learning in a professional way? And what areas of analytics do you think would have a bigger relevance in the next few years?
I think healthcare is woefully behind. We are the last, it's sad to say, but really, telehealth, virtual visits, why did it take a pandemic to move this forward into double digits? I think healthcare is exploding with the use of data and analytics as well. It's interesting, there was a company that just started talking to, and they've developed the science of using machine learning to then identify the best course of treatment for a patient versus relying on physicians to talk to each other and talk to the right physician to know what the best course of treatment would be. So I think healthcare is one, and I think it will continue to explode because the technology not only used in the delivery of services is expanding, but the integration of data has not occurred yet fully. We're still dealing with large claims systems that sometimes don't integrate the clinical aspects, meaning what was the conversation with somebody, what were the lab results, what did the doctor or nurse see. So I think healthcare is going to be one. And then I would think education would be right there too. Every industry is going to be there. But because of the pandemic, I think education and healthcare are probably, along with climate change, are going to be the three areas that will explode.
One more question before we proceed further. What attributes does a company like yours look for in a data analyst?
So Gallagher, it's a culture. And I think we understand the value at Gallagher of every individual. And what you bring to the table is you bring an energy, you bring yourself, and you bring your knowledge. So your skill set is important, but you yourself as an individual is very important too. And we can talk a little bit about that in a couple minutes, but and maybe it's a good time to talk about it now. But our culture is that we work as a team. Everybody's important to the team, and every job is important. There are no second-class citizens. We always embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we value that. We also embrace collaboration. So when you think about what skill sets, think about what you know and your energy and what you bring, because you've learned things that I probably will never learn or ever know. But you also bring yourself. And if you're willing to learn, we have great internship programs that then integrate into job placement. We also have jobs that are posted across the globe within our various divisions. Everybody needs data analysts, from the finance team to the sales team to the clinical team to just the operations team, keeping our buildings going, keeping our workforce happy and healthy. We're going to need data and analysts in every sector of our business. So bring to the table what you have and be willing to grow and learn. And Gallagher could be a really good place for you to be.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gretchen. We can move on with our presentation.
Okay. So Teachable Machine. Has anybody seen Teachable Machine or looked at this YouTube video? I came across it the other day and was intrigued. I just wanted to share it with you if you hadn't seen it. And that's all I really have to say. It's really exciting to see. So I'm going to let you bring it up, Shahzad, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Give me a minute.
People are training computers and creating machine learning models to explore all kinds of new ideas. New ways to interact.
Yes.
To understand the world. To play and experiment. But machine learning is pretty intimidating to get into. So we've been wondering, what if it wasn't? With Teachable Machine, we set out to make it easier for anyone to create machine learning models without needing to write any machine learning code. When it first launched in 2017, it allowed everyone to get a feeling for what machine learning is all about. But now, Teachable Machine puts the power of machine learning in your hands, allowing you to save your models and use them in your own projects.
So let's say you want to build a model to recognize you versus your dog. You just open up the site, record samples of you and samples of your dog. Click Train, and you instantly have your own machine learning model, which you can use in your sites, apps, and more. You can upload your model to host it online, or download it to work entirely on device.
With Teachable Machine, you can create custom models for all sorts of things. using images, audio, or even poses. Personalized machine learning models for the things that matter to you. And folks have already been trying it out, using Teachable Machine in their own experiments, solving problems in their communities, or even just at home. Start creating and see where your ideas take you at g.co/teachable machine.
Something to explore, right?
That was an
Do I
awesome
need to?
video. Yes, you
Yeah.
can present again. Yes, you can present again.
All right. So are you seeing, let's see, resume presenting.
Yep.
So teachable machine, if you think about something that you want to do or explore, I think it might be something that if you haven't already looked at it, it just raised so many things and that were brought to mind. But I'm like, wow, I wonder if I could solve that. I wonder if I could solve that. And some of those things are going to be needed in healthcare, right? And you saw some of the examples. But we know that, Simply Safe and all the other things that are out there in the technology space in terms of security and how we access buildings, that is another way to leverage what you know and then take it to another level. But explore and having conversations with people along the way is really important, and network whenever you can. But a little bit about Gallagher, and then love for any other questions. But I don't want to spend a great deal of time on this, but I do want to share with you that I am so delighted to be able to share with you what Gallagher brings to the table. It's a diverse organization. It is an organization that believes in strong values. We're global. We have internships within various aspects of our business, and we have job opportunities internationally. We're in 950 offices in 56 countries. And it's just a tremendous place to be. People are committed to each other. People are committed to our clients. And we really think of data and analytics as part of our consulting value proposition. So we look at data, we run the analytics, whatever that may be. It could be anything from healthcare to cybersecurity to workmen's compensation to property and casualty, meaning the safety and security of buildings, and all those things that surround that. And then we deliver strategies and continue to measure results. So analytics is in our DNA and is used by every member of the team on an ongoing basis in some manner. Let's go to the next. And I think it's a strong culture in that we have been recognized by several external organizations, one being Ethisphere for one of the most ethical companies for 10 years running, one of the best places to work from an LGBTQ plus. We have embraced diversity, equity, and inclusion for a number of years, but we now know that that is out there and now being talked about in more of a ongoing dialogue with clients. So we have a very strong value proposition there and a consulting team in that space as well. We do believe in our social responsibility as a company in order to promote and help communities, both locally as well as globally. We're a premier platinum partner with Special Olympics, and we do value a diversity on every level. And that means from a gender standpoint of view, from a background, from a culture, from an economic standpoint of view, we do value the diversity that everybody brings to the table. And we do know and recognize the importance of bringing new people into the organization to share what they know as well. Any other questions?
Yes, yes, we do have a couple of more questions that have come in, Gretchen. The students are expressing their thanks and gratitude to you for this wonderful presentation. A few of them want to know how they can connect with you after the presentation is done.
Sure. So I think the next slide gives you my email address. It also gives you my phone number.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
And
it also,
go ahead.
And Shazad, it also gives down at the bottom, it also gives you the website for ajg.com. So explore, look at opportunities. I just looked today and I think there were over 25 positions for various analysts within the corporation. So we're growing and we're continuing to do very well during the pandemic. But we are dependent upon talent and new employees.
Thank you, Gretchen. I did share with the students in the chat the careers link. Thank you so much for bringing it to our attention. And I think our students would love to take advantage after listening to all that you had to say about Gallagher. Wonderful organization to work for. One other question that I have here, from your perspective, what are the main challenges a data analyst can face? Do you have any advice?
I think the most important thing to remember with data and analytics is to tell a story. People will remember a story. And I know that sounds kind of quirky, but that would be another avenue you might want to just consider exploring: storytelling, being able to take information and say, this is what it means, this is how it can impact what's going on within the business setting or whatever you're doing, and this is the next step. So always remember that. And something that a great mentor of mine at Gallagher by the name of Adam Wolf gave to me, and I'm probably not following it entirely well right now, but he says there's a 6 and a 666 rule, right? So do you have 6 seconds to tell your story, right? Or do you have 60 seconds to tell your story? Or do you have 60 minutes to tell your story? So kind of remember that when you're on the elevator and you want to get an idea across to somebody, you only have 6 seconds. But kind of capturing that momentum in your thought process as you're working with colleagues will help you communicate your thoughts. But remember, you're going to need to tell a story, because numbers, as we look at them every day, we're so used to seeing them, and I get all excited about the number, and then I'm like, oh, I didn't tell a story, so they're not going to remember.
That's so true. That's so true. Thank you so much. One more question that we have here. Being an insurance human capital company, does Gallagher expect analysts to have a thorough knowledge in finance too, or slight knowledge is enough?
All right. So I was a finance major in my master's was in finance and strategy. And we've got a lot of underwriters and actuaries that are handling the finance aspects. So I think having an understanding of it is very helpful, but having a finance degree and knowing all the nitty gritty, I don't think it's entirely necessary. It all depends on what job you're doing and where you're contributing within the company.
Thank you, Gretchen. One last question for the day. Student wants to know about international students visa situation. Can they apply with an OPT visa? International students can work on OPT. Does Arthur Gallagher accept students who are on student visas or OPT visas?
So I don't know the detail on that. but I'm happy to research that and get back to you. I do know that we hire individuals internationally, and people from that either work internationally or are interested in working in the U.S. So, but let me write that, or let me get back to you on that, Shazad, because I'm not,
Sure.
so that exact terminology, I'm not familiar with.
I understand. Basically, what that means, Gretchen, is students who are on a student visa here in the US can actually work without any sponsorship for up to 3 years, and they don't need any and that's the provision which they call OPT. Typically, after that provision is done, they would need a H-1B visa, which is what I think Arthur Gallagher does sponsor, but we will wait for you to come back to us with clarification.
Sure, I'm happy to find out that information and get back to you, Shazad.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. And I think we are on time. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Gretchen Vermeulen for taking out so much of her precious time and giving us this awesome presentation today. Thank you, Gretchen.